When you give yourself over to sexual sin or perversion, there really is a deeper spiritual reality behind that. Whether that be lust, adultery, or fornication, there is something more sinister happening behind the scenes that many people don't see. If you struggle with sexual sin on any level and you desire freedom and the strength to resist temptation, I truly believe that this mini-series is going to help you in your battle. We're going to expose sexual sin for what it really is, and we're going to use the scriptures to do that. In the second episode, we're going to break down one of the most referenced events in Israel's history, and this event involves Balaam and the Moabite women. Let's dive into the scriptures. Numbers 22:7, it says, "The elders of Moab and the elders of Midian departed with the fees of divination in their hand. And they came to Balaam, or Balaam, and gave him Balak's message." Balak is the king of Moab. Balak is freaking out that Israel's come up and they've heard of what they did to Egypt. And so they're trying to hire Balaam to come and curse Israel. We're going to see throughout the next 3 chapters, as there's a lightning storm around me, that God is going to say over and over, "I have not cursed them, I have blessed them." So because of that, Balaam cannot curse them, even with all his occult practices and divining rituals. Like, he can't do it. Even though he seems to desire to do that because he wants money. We're going to see who Balaam really is in the end. But after God over and over says, I'm not going to curse them, they're blessed, Balaam hatches a scheme with the king of Moab, and they decide, well, let's make Israel bring a curse upon themselves. If they come out from under the protection of God through disobedience, idolatry, sexual immorality, then they'll bring a curse upon themselves. And so they use the Moabite women to entice them, and sexual perversion, the occult practices, and idolatry are central to this story. And we're going to dive in. But I hope that this series serves as a guide for you to help you gain more victory in your battle against not just sexual sin in your life, but really all sin. But that's the focus of this series. I'm going to do my best to walk you through what the Lord has showed me over the course of my Christian walk. And in the second episode, we're going to expose the spiritual reality behind the story of Balaam and the Moabite women. And I think there's tremendous wisdom for us in this story. And in this story, you're going to see those 3 main components that I've already mentioned in the first episode. If you have not watched the first video in this mini-series, please do yourself a favor and go watch that. It will set the foundation for what we're going to build upon. And the rest of these videos are going to be based on that first one. But in the first video, I talked about how there are 3 essential components to this whole study that I'm doing. There's going to be sexual immorality or perversion, the occult, that be witchcraft or sorcery, and then there's idolatry. Remember, those are the 3 components that we're going to see in most of these examples that I bring up. Sexual perversion is often a gateway into blatant idolatry, or it is a form of idolatry itself, and it involves some kind of occult practices or rituals or elements associated with it. So in this story, Balaam and Balak are going to use sexual perversion and sexual appeal to draw the men of Israel into idolatry, out from under the protection of God, and into what is very likely occult practices and ritualistic kind of things. So let me take you to Numbers chapter 25 to give you the tragic story of what ends up happening when Israel falls prey to this trap. Numbers chapter 25. While Israel lived in Shittim, the people began to whore with the daughters of Moab. Okay, and these invited the people to the sacrifices of their gods. To whore after the women is not just sexually speaking, but it's in one sense going after their gods with these women who are dragging the men. And the people ate and bowed down to their gods. Notice the element of eating and bowing down or sacrificing. That's what it looks like to give oneself over to the pagan deities. So Israel yoked himself to Baal of Peor, and the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel. And the Lord said to Moses, "Take all the chiefs of the people and hang them in the sun before the Lord, that the fierce anger of the Lord may turn away from Israel." This is a very, very big deal. And this event becomes one of the biggest failures in Israel's history that gets referenced quite a bit. And Moses said to the judges of Israel, "Each of you kill those of his men who have yoked themselves to Baal of Peor." How? Through idolatry, through sacrificial meals, through rituals, through the sacrifices offered to these gods, these false gods, or what Paul will talk about as demons. Okay, and they need to die. Okay, and behold, one of the people of Israel came and brought a Midianite woman to his family. in the sight of Moses and in the sight of the whole congregation of the people of Israel, while they were weeping in the entrance of the tent of meeting, when Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron, so Phinehas is the grandson of Aaron, the first high priest of Israel, when he saw it, he rose and he left the congregation, took a spear in his hand, and went after the man of Israel into the chamber and pierced both of them, man and woman, the man of Israel and the woman through her belly. Thus the plague on the people of Israel was stopped. So they are bringing an end to a plague or a curse that has come upon Israel. Death is breaking out and is the result of idolatry and sin and rebellion. And someone needs to step in to stop it. Hence we see an allusion to the gospel. Nevertheless, those who died by the plague were 24,000. 24,000 people of Israel died by this curse or plague that came through, first of all, sexual immorality. And through that became a gateway into idolatry, which very likely possibly involved occult practices beyond just sacrifices. And we'll see this throughout Israel's history. I don't think that's unrealistic to say that. And the Lord said to Moses, Phinehas has essentially solved this thing. That guy's a boss. And then look at what is said about the people whom Phinehas threw a spear through. The name of the slain man of Israel who was killed with the Midianite woman was Zimri, the son of Salu, chief of the Simeonites. So we have the chief of the tribe of Simeon. His son was the guy that was speared. Now the name of the Midianite woman who was killed was Cosbi, the daughter of Zur, the tribal head of a father's house in Midian. So these are like pretty weighty individuals. They have quite the standing in their communities, quite the status. So these are not like, low-level individuals in that sense. Not that it necessarily matters, but the greater the influence and authority in a community, the more potential there is for destruction and for that wickedness to spread quickly. We'll see this with the kings. We'll see this with the priests that defect and the prophets. Right, so we have two high-ranking individuals from both nations, essentially, coming together, and Phinehas brought an end to that. Why do I bring up this story? Because, as you're going to see in a second, this was a scheme that was more than just about getting Israel to give themselves over to sexual sin. That was the means to an end. The goal and the end of this thing was that Moab would stay on top and Israel would find themselves lower and under the curse of death that they bring upon themselves through rebellion against Yahweh. And how did rebellion happen? It seemed as though that fade, that descent happened slowly, that it was not just all at once, but a progression of things that started with sex appeal and this sexual desire for pleasure in the flesh, and then giving oneself over to the pagan nations. God said, do not intermarry with the pagan nations. They end up doing that, and what they're led into is worse than the initial sin they gave themselves over to. And I really want us to be thinking about the nature of sin. Sin is never content with just like that first initial taste. Sin wants to take you deeper. Sin wants you to plunge deeper into descent and into wickedness, so that you find yourself in the kind of perversion and the kind of practices and habits and thought patterns that you never, ever imagined yourself dealing with, because it started with a gateway kind of sin, a gateway kind of perversion. And so look at Numbers chapter 31, verse 16. This is the nature of sexual sin. Not just sexual sin, but in this context, it's used as a trap to snare men and draw them into deeper wickedness that really brings death and curse upon the community. So Numbers 31:16, it says, "Behold, these Moabite women, on Balaam's advice, they caused the people of Israel to act treacherously." Who did? The women. How? Through sexual appeal, intermarriage, that kind of thing. You can be with us, come and worship our gods. We'll see this with Solomon. We'll see this with Ahab. We'll see this with the foolish woman in Proverbs, that it's always, hey, I know you want sexual pleasure, but I'm going to bring you into worse things that you don't see on the other side of that. And so these Moabite women caused Israel to sin. Not that Israel is irresponsible and, well, we didn't know. You know what you're doing. But they were caused to sin against the Lord in the incident of Peor, and the plague came upon the congregation. Now this is what Joshua chapter 13 is going to say about Balaam. Balaam, the son of Beor, the one who practiced divination. I'm sure you probably thought, this guy's forgot about the occult element. If you read about the practices of Balaam as a seer or diviner, I don't believe that he does use pagan rituals. He does use occult practices. He does use what for us is definitely off the table, right, in terms of interacting with the divine. But God seems to still work through that. Just because God allows something to transpire and still works through that methodology doesn't mean he approves of it necessarily. And so Balaam is practicing divination, and he's killed by the sword. What were they trying to pay him for? To divine or scheme up some kind of spiritual curse upon Israel and bring it upon them. The New Testament authors will say some strong things about Balaam, and I really want you to see the occult dimension to this. This is not the only isolated case where sexual sin and idolatry go hand in hand. And this is not the only case where sexual sin, idolatry, and the occult or witchcraft or sorcery or divining go hand in hand. Hey, if you don't know me, my name is Jason, and you can find everything about this ministry on AboveReproachMinistry.com. All of our Bible resources, our online church, ways to support this ministry, and so much more. And if you live anywhere near Spartanburg, South Carolina, come check out our church on Sundays at 10 a.m. Also, I have 2 brief updates for those of you that are part of this community. Number 1, the revision of my book Fruitful is coming out soon, hopefully in the next few weeks. So be sure to grab a copy of that when it does release. And number 2, we now have options on our website for monthly support. And when you become part of our monthly support team, you get access to all of our exclusive teachings and videos that get released every week. This is just my way of saying thank you. All right, that's all I got for you. Let's get back to the video. So this is what Revelation 2:14 says. Jesus here is writing to the church in Pergamum, and he says, I have a few things against you. You have some there who hold the teaching of Balaam. What is that teaching? Well, he taught Balak to put a stumbling block before the sons of Israel. So what did he teach Balak? Hey, you can use your women as an obstacle, as a trap or a snare for the Israelites. And then Balak would probably go, well, how so? Well, entice them into intermarriage or sexual engagements. Why would we do that? Because that's a stepping stone into this next part. Sacrificing to idols, eating food sacrificed to idols, and practicing sexual immorality. So very often you will see sexual immorality, idolatry, and the occult practices very much hand in hand. How does the enemy get you to fall into idolatry? Well, sometimes sexual sin or perversion, I would say 99% of the time, it is a form of idolatry itself, but it's designed to plunge you into deeper perversion and worse, if there is such a thing, worse idolatry, where it's blatant, where it's outright and explicit, and I'm bowing down to false gods. This is a different conversation when it comes to believers versus unbelievers, but this is still the general trajectory of sexual perversion, is to move you away from Yahweh, away from life, away from abundance in God, and into what is not going to promote human flourishing, right? And so these things very often go hand in hand. I'm just trying to give you the biblical case for these things. 2 Peter chapter 2, it says, if God did not spare the angels when they sinned. I think this is very likely a reference to Genesis chapter 6, which I do not just believe to be the sons of Seth versus the sons of Cain, intermixing, God forbid, but rather we do see spiritual beings intermixing and intermarrying with human women. And I think this is a reference to that, considering what Enoch has to say about that situation. Not that Second Temple literature is ultimate, but it does help us understand the cultural context of certain statements, phrases, stories, and understand from the original audience's perspective. So if God did not spare angels when they sinned, likely that's in view, again, sexual sin, but he cast them into hell, committed them to chains of gloomy darkness to be kept until the judgment if he did not spare the ancient world, but preserved Noah, a herald of righteousness, with 7 others, when he brought a flood upon the world of the ungodly, if by turning the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah to ashes, which I would say sexual sin is part of, not the only, but part of the reason that God brought judgment on Sodom and Gomorrah is because of the perversion and outright sexual immorality that was blatantly filling that community. If God turned them to ashes and condemned them to extinction, making them an example of what happens to the ungodly, and if he rescued Lot, right, so you got Noah and you got Lot. On the other hand, you got Sodom and Gomorrah and the angels and the ancient world of Noah's day. And if he rescued righteous Lot, greatly distressed by the sensual conduct of the wicked. Now, very often that term is associated with or referring to sexual sin or perversion. Some kind of fleshly appetite is in view there. So likely the focus in this context is Sodom and Gomorrah. Not the only reason, but the main reason in context is their sensual conduct. And that righteous man lived among them day after day, was tormented, his righteous soul, over their lawless deeds that he saw and heard. Remember how they want to sleep with the 2 men, the angels that come to Lot, and they're trying to break down the door? Then the Lord knows how to rescue the godly from trials, and to keep the unrighteous under punishment, the day of judgment, those who indulge in the lust of defiling passion. I think that's key to understanding the main flaws of the Sodom and Gomorrah community. Indulging in lustful, defiling passion, sexual immorality, sensual conduct. Not the only reason, again, but one of the main things. And despising authority, right? Bold and willful, they don't tremble as they blaspheme the glorious ones, whereas angels, though greater in might and power, don't even pronounce a blasphemous judgment against them before the Lord. Now watch, he's going to bring up Balaam. I believe he's going to consistently talk about blaspheming, pleasure, reveling in pleasure right here, eyes full of adultery. The idea is there's not just sexual sin, but that seems to be the main thing in view associated with the people Peter is talking about. They have eyes full of adultery, insatiable for sin. They entice unsteady souls. What did we see Balaam and Balak do through the Moabite women? Through it, whether they hired them or whether they blackmailed them, Moabite women were used to entice unsteady souls. They have hearts trained in greed. That's what Balaam is known for. Accursed children, forsaken the right way, they've gone astray. They've followed the way of Balaam. Remember, Revelation said, don't follow the teaching of Balaam, the son of Beor, who loved gain from wrongdoing. He was rebuked for his own transgression, and he was restrained, his own madness. But either way, the idea here, just keep going. Speaking loud boast of folly, they entice by sensual passions of the flesh those who are barely escaping. Again, a reference to not only Balaam, but primarily what happened through the Moabite women at Balaam's advice. They promise them freedom, but they themselves are slaves of corruption. Whatever overcomes a person, to that he's enslaved. So whether it's Balaam, whether it's the angels in Noah's day, or the ancient world of Noah's day, or Sodom and Gomorrah, one of the main characteristics of the wicked and those enslaved to sin in unbelief is they're just giving themselves over to sensual passions of their flesh. Sexual sin is at the center of it's one of their biggest priorities, one of their biggest concerns. So I just want to set the tone for the next few stories to show you that Balaam, Balak, these powerful individuals, loving money, power, authority, wanting to take advantage of Israel, how did they lead them into the curse and bringing death upon themselves? How'd they get them to blatantly bow down to the false gods of Moab and sacrifice and eat these sacrificial meals? What is that? What is it that the enemy used to entice men, whether they knew what was on the other side or not? Because I think even with sexual sin, sometimes you know what's on the other side of that, and you're still willing to go through with it and just deal with the pain when you get to it. I'll cross that bridge when I get there. Other times, I have no idea what's on the other side, and I'm just caught off guard. So what is it that they use? They use sexual appeal. What was Balaam known for, and what is part of, I don't know how he managed to scheme this up, honestly, because the text never tells us that God told Balaam, if Israel sins, they'll bring themselves under a curse. How did he get that information? I would like to suggest through occult practices. That's how he gets his information, his knowledge of the spiritual, his insight into the spiritual realm is through pagan practices and the occult. And that was the means. I would like to suggest that was at least part of the way that they came to figure out this plan. Use Moabite women, sex appeal, get them into idolatry. And likely, if occult practices aren't in the beginning stages of this process, I would highly suggest that they were on the other side of it, meaning that when Israel gave themselves over to these defiling, idolatrous practices, it very much involved the occult, whether that be witchcraft, sorcery. I don't know how deep that went, but when we get to video number 6, we'll look at the occult practices and the pagan rituals of the nations that involved a sexual dimension, okay? So for now, I just want us to be thinking about that. Like, wow, I think there is a case to be made that these things are often, if not always, interconnected. Idolatry, sexual perversion or sin, and the occult. In the next video, we're going to look at the deeper truth behind sexual sin involving Jezebel and Solomon's foreign wives as well. Solomon, and that whole thing is confusing. But when we break it down, I think it'll become more clear. And with each of these videos or sessions, I would highly recommend that you don't just jump to the next one. Spend some time in prayer. Spend some time meditating on these passages we go through. Think through these things, like take inventory. Have a healthy degree of introspection and self-reflection, and just consider where in your life this wisdom can apply. Where can I gain a better understanding of God and the world, and where can I be more serious about my faith? And then go to the next video. There's no reason to rush through these. There's no pressure. I know you want to beat sin and find victory, but sometimes a lot of victory can come from putting a little bit of knowledge into practice. So in the next video, we'll tackle Solomon, the foreign wives, and Jezebel, and I will see you guys in that video. Hey, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more biblical content just like this. We have hundreds of videos, but you might be most interested in these ones right here. Also, visit our website for all of our free resources and classes. And thank you so much for partnering with us financially to make this ministry even possible. Keep moving towards Jesus, and I'll see you in the next video.